Welcome back again. Once again, thank you for your time. The background of mine regarding music is both classical and jazz and experimental. Okay, one side which is classical and the other side which is those two currents, those two streams. Classical because you've got structure, you've got harmony, you've got rhythm, you've got even power and virtuosity with the classical environment. Though with the jazz you've got virtuosity as well, but it's destructured, and this is why it's interesting, because you're destructuring timbres, pitches, the way of playing as well is quite different. And so I used to play quite a lot on a daily basis, and so I had achieved an average level of virtuosity 15 or 20 years ago. Now, since my life has been quite different, and that the music hasn't been, unfortunately, my only occupation for the past 25 years, this virtuosity I lost quite a lot, because I used to play also a church organ with the feet as well. Okay, so up to 4 layers of keyboards and with the feet. This actually, before I was 6 years old, my mother was listening to much music, especially jazz, pop, but classical as well, and especially Mozart, Bach, and others. And so the structure that I've got in my music and my way of working refers back directly to Johann Sebastian Bach, because, to my humble opinion, this is the master of the masters. Not only because of the music he's been creating and the structure which is within his music, but the way the virtuosity had to be evolving in a structured way. So Bach's most important feature when he was composing music was to start with the bass, because every single frequency which was above the 40 hertz or 30 hertz or 20 hertz of the pedal with the feet at the organ was considered to be the trebles. And he was saying that, let's say, the whole structure of like a spider web is starting from the very center, and this very center is are the bass frequencies, okay? And these are the bass also which provide the type of accords and chords which are then referred to as being the music for the listener. Now, the thing which is quite interesting when you play in a church organ, of course, every single church sounds differently from one another. But the point is that, let's say, you've got this massive power you got surrounding you. This is really magical, because you've got frequencies and harmonics which are, let's say, totally blended into your own soul, and you're blending into the music backwards, okay? So this set of reciprocity between the music, the frequencies, the harmonics, and the player is something which is my favorite in the organic classical environment. I love the piano, I love playing piano and all this, but church organ is something which is really magical, which is one step beyond what the piano or two pianos or three pianos or even four pianos type of sets are producing. Now the stuff for the music I'm making, I'm trying to both have the something which doesn't sound, let's say, mainstream. Because if it sounds mainstream, no one needs me. There are billions of producers, of players, of artists within the mainstream industry who are totally dedicated to this environment, who have a dedicated environment which is fully compatible with their activity. And the thing which is quite important is that, let's say, the time to market and return on investment are, let's say, the main topics for the mainstream industry, And so they don't rely on to something which is experimental, neither being himself a bit experimental. So let's call it this way. Now the thing is, when an artist is stepping by, or a label or a studio, it's either because of the curiosity which is dedicated to the gears themselves, or because the sound of the masters differ quite substantially from what the mainstream media or mainstream industry is providing regarding all the tuning, all the flavors, all the frequencies and harmonics and all this, and the way, let's say, we are working the music. Something which is very important, to my humble opinion, when people are mixing, they are mixing the old way, where you select one set of effects per bus. On my side, I'd rather have, let's say, as many effects as required per track, which is of course much more expensive as a process, but the control, balance, sound and reactivity is incomparable. So that's another way of working, and it's originating from the IT and telco industry environment experience that I had, where, let's say, you've got huge investments from very large telco carriers. So the problem is not one switch or two switch or three switch. Okay, the thing is, it has to work 24/7, 365 days per year for 5 years, period. Because if it stops, everyone is in deep shit. So basically, for the music that we do produce here, we try to have an adequation of and a balanced environment between the requests from the customer and the ability of ours within our small structure to be able to provide it. So if I had, let's say, one, or maybe let's talk about three main instruments, and I could buy nothing else, I would buy one Moog memory Moog, because it's the Moog sound like a modular sound, but within a much smaller case, okay? And this is portable. It's very heavy, but it's portable. And it's polyphonic as well. So if you want to, and it has a embedded sequencer and an arpeggiator within it. So if you want to have a standalone solution with the old sound from Moog, we have a Memory Moog Plus, which has been perfected and maintained by the top maintenance team in this industry, which is based in Astoria, which is next to New York. It's called Tone Tweakers, and this is the official maintenance and repair environment for the largest vintage scene collection studio worldwide, which is called the Synth Museum. Now, the second one would be Oberheim Matrix 12, because that gear has all the abilities out of the sampling ability. It provides, let's say, subtractive. You can make FM, you can make analog sounds, digital sounds, you can make experimental sounds like a modular. You've got the Oberheim sound, and you've got memories, which is quite key when you've got so many parameters embedded. Yeah, the third device would be an ARP 2600, because this is the low-scale version of the behemoth from ARP. It was the ARP 2500, and it was not portable. It was a huge modular structure, and so this ARP 2600 has been became very popular and famous with artists in the what is called now labeled such as the ambient stream, so like Jean-Michel Jarre, Klaus Schulze, Tangerine Dream, even Kraftwerk and some others were using this in the jazz and free jazz and jazz tech stream from the 70s as well. It went even popular in the pop from the early 70s. It was also famous because one version of this, but polyphonic, of that gear was on stage even in 1982 with Genesis on the Three Sides Lives. So this would be the three main gears that I would recommend to have from the studio. Now, if you've got, let's say, a small space available on your private owned island and you accept to spend maybe 2 to 3K with one more gear, I'd recommend the Kawai K1000S because this is the only gear which is very powerful and which is providing additive synthesis, such as a church organ, so that you add frequencies on top of each other, and you build up that way until you're satisfied with the sound. So basically, that would be the 3 up to 4 main gears that I'd recommend. So since we started Swiss Vintage Studio, something which is important that I didn't mention, before making the recording, mixing and mastering on behalf of other artists, I was specialized into producing music. Usually very experimental music, so just for you to bear in mind, that would be shared on the website from Swiss Vintage Studio later on, but let's say this is already available on the SoundCloud of mine. For instance, there is a track of ours from Johanna Fagan and myself, which is called Long Beach is Calling. This only track by itself requested 100 tracks. Okay, just for the song, and so thanks to that song precisely, I got more professional by using what is requested for the mixing and the mastering tools. Okay, so basically you learn whilst you are working. Of course, you can read, you can be taught, you can learn, you can do many things, but the best way to learn is to do it yourself. And so the learning curve of what has become Swiss Vintage Studio now is, and best example is that you've got top people from the industry requesting Swiss Vintage Studio to provide either mixing or recording or mastering. So sometimes it is so different from what they've been expecting that sometimes they choose it or they choose not to take it. But what's quite interesting is that, let's say, the industry by itself has been existing quite before Swiss Vintage Studio. But the offering that we provide is really tailored. And since this is tailor-made really to the specifically to the customer, this is one flavor that some people throughout the industry are looking for, because they want something which is organic. Even digital equipment sounds organic, which is quite interesting from our perspective. Now, 10 years ago, we were not able to provide a good mixing or a good mastering because we had no clue of what would be required for it to sound precisely crystal clear. But now, let's say, for instance, there is a process which is key to my humble opinion. Most of the sound engineers mixing and mastering use buses and to, let's say, make the adequation between all the effect processors and the tracks and the sounds themselves. My humble opinion is that, of course, this is a much more expensive type of setup and approach, but every single track needs to be reacting live to whatever modification you want to apply to each track. And so sometimes we have, if we take once again Long Beach is Calling, you had up to 10 or 15 effect processors per track times 100 tracks. So it means that, let's say, if you're not used to work with very complex environments, the musicians themselves tell you, go to hell. Because it takes time, it's complicated, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes the computer crashes, sometimes everything crashes, sometimes your head needs to be crashed because you're outside the real boundaries of what has been requested by the artist. And so this is the learning curve from a Swiss Vintage Studio. Now, referring to the industry itself, the industry is a bit like in the telecom industry 25 years ago. The industry had the ability to provide much more power, throughput, and output to the final clients, relying on state-of-the-art equipment. But instead of doing so, it's a bit the same like they did in the end-user IT environment. Instead of choosing SSD disks and fiber channel disks running SCSI 3 type of norms, they defined something which was called USB. And so the industry itself, same stuff for the PC environment. Instead of choosing Windows NT4, it chose Windows 95, which was not really brilliant operating system on the PC environment. And so the choices made by these industries 25 years ago in the IT and telco industries are exactly the same that have been partaking in the music industry. Instead of choosing something which is providing more abilities to consciousness expanding human beings, knowing, learning, and capable of more things that throughout the past, they are providing a lesser quality environment and set of tools, which makes that everything sounds the same, whatever the artist you consider, whatever the studio you consider, and whatever the sound engineer you consider. And this is a norm, and this norm is a good news for us because we're in the niche market and we are dedicated to something which is maybe 0.5% of the whole request from the industry, but it is quite enough and quite beyond our own capabilities to provide all the musicians that type of flavors. Regarding music production, my let's say the utmost goal that I'm looking for is when you've got, let's say, something which is with the creative process, the quality of what has been created, the way it's been mixed, the way it's been mastered, and the way it's been accepted by my first wave of public is not the public. It is the other composers or producers or studios. And so that, let's say, if top people or musicians or top guys, okay, who are not willing to produce something just dedicated to return investment type of approach, if these people accept the track and the production and say that they are satisfied with it or they find it great, this is my utmost achievement for the production. Yes, my first test was 35 years ago when I proposed sounds to people from the industry. I had just one synthesizer and I had a 2 tracks recording tape deck, and they were quite astonished because it sounded like you would have, let's say, a huge recording studio or a huge label or a huge environment or factory from a manufacturer, because it sounded so clear, wide, and so many harmonics embedded. So yeah, it was approximately, I was 14, 15 years old. After that, let's say something that we sold to Philips in 1986 was that with a friend of mine, we designed the equivalence, but the ancestor of the Dolby surround system. Okay, it was 35 years ago, and you just had to pass your fingers at 10 centimeters from the rack itself to select exactly the options you wanted onto this rack. And so the sound was so great, so wide, so dynamic and powerful, but I was only 14 years old, so Philips told us, you know what, we're going to put your name in a in a stuff where somebody is going to remember of your name and your achievement, but we're going to make it on our own. I had no money, and neither the money nor the knowledge to pursue Philips, so there was a personal achievement, but for free. Now, regarding the music itself, when Mrs. Fagan accepted to work with me on several projects, it was quite an achievement because she's been in the industry, especially in the UK, for the past 25 years. She's been on stage, she's been recording with top producers worldwide, and she's got a remarkable, unique voice. Okay, she knows exactly how to use it, how to perform, how to do whatever is required for the quality to be maximized and achievable. When she accepted to make several songs with me and to work with a stranger that she didn't know about, and we just started to chat on over SoundCloud, and we made a test and a trial, and she was really amazed. That was an achievement. That was almost 10 years ago now. And so this is how we started to work together. Then when I made some remixed and remastering for some DJs, famous DJs, that were interesting because they're used to big equipment, big studios, big labels, or smaller labels or small studios, but they've got, let's say, the connections, they know many people, so they don't need Swiss Vintage Studio to release a LP or EP. But let's say when they started the first test, they were quite amazed by the sound quality that we have. It's a bit like in the techno field, usually you just need power and dynamics, okay? But when you give power, dynamics, width, and so much clarity and precision that, let's say, it's a bit like you're touching the sound, this was quite an achievement because they didn't believe that something like that could be achieved within such a small factory. Yes, failures on a daily basis. Simple. Sometimes the equipment doesn't work. You have an appointment, the equipment doesn't work, you're in deep trouble. Major failure. Sometimes another failure is, so if we speak about devices, sometimes everything works fine, but the computer, you don't have a clue why, doesn't switch on. So no DAW, no plugins, no recording sessions, nothing. So you just stuck the nose in the carpet. Another nice type of failure is when you don't have power supply because there are roadworks around and they cut the line. So something which is remarkable during a session. This is something which is lovely. Another failure is when you have to travel 10,000 kilometers with everything, and that the person who's welcoming you just tell you something that he should have told you before flying in. But there are lovely failures like these. Then you have got personal failures. So personal failures are even worse because it means that either you don't listen correctly to the client, then you've got a major brain problem, you need surgery. Or sometimes it's also because they don't even know themselves that what they're telling you is not exactly what they've got in mind. This is happening very often with the artist. You start and initiate a process, it's 10:15, but at 12:15 they tell you, I didn't ask you for this, I asked for this. So I said, no, these are your requests, okay? So, read, you wrote them. I didn't write them, you wrote them, okay? Or sometimes, after 3 days of sessions, they tell you, you know, I don't like the way it sounds. You mean, what do you mean by the way it sounds? Yeah, I want it to sound more, you know, quite grittier. I want it to be more organic and all this. So we're going to reuse that synth and so we re-record the stuff, and sometimes it happened very lately with someone who's a brilliant chap and great artist, but it was a bit difficult because the requests from day one deferred 180 degrees from day 5. And so it was very difficult to provide a sustainable achievement for the artist. And this is bad because reputation, of course, is at risk. But let's say if people don't neither get nor feel satisfied when leaving the studio, it means that you're outlined anyway. So, and that your work and all the energy that you've been providing is useless. And if it's useless, then it's a bad proposal for the client. Such moments, yeah. Well, it depends. The problem with the suicide is if you suicide yourself, you can't come back to the studio in the afternoon and rework the things. You see, so it's too definitive as an approach. So let's go back to something which is more workable. When you lack inspiration in our studio, it is either because you're totally exhausted, which is sometimes the case, or that you are losing yourself, as we were stating in preamble, into the gears and the tech, and that you are diverting yourself from the real aim, which is generating something to achieve a product which is marketable. Or sometimes it's because, let's say, you lose your temper or you can't focus. And sometimes we can't focus because we have other works to do or other problems to solve, or like any human being. But the thing is, this is a little crown jewel here. Of course, there are better studios, better equipped studios. If you take real world from Mr. Peter Gabriel, for instance, there are less vintage gears, but the studio is awesome. So the money that has been spent into it as well, and when you've got the whole industry which is pushing together with you, it's easier. But in a smaller facility, I said the 2 facilities of ours, this is something which is with a very limited personal wealth. It's a limited kind of proposal regarding the accommodation because it's quite small. You can't have a full band with 5 players banging around the whole studio. You just have to be very kinky, very precise, understand that every single step that you make in the studio can generate a huge dramatic situation. Just remember that if you take your foot into the 1200 cables, it's mistake big time, okay? So, but let's say you learn to be patient, that's it. I take it from my past experiences where everything has been so intricate and complicated. Very interesting because frankly, to be a living loony still authorized to walk down the street means that and not being dead is already an achievement. So once that stuff is being understood, back to realistic environment, to know that you've got very nice people that you met, that you meet, and that you will meet, that you can take care of people the way you want freely, or at least have the hope to be able to do it, and have the ability to still use fingers, though being broken from everywhere because of so many accidents. Being able to caress my doggy because she's still alive even though old, being able to live with a beautiful garden in a nice and sweet house, and have all this equipment, and have the honor and privilege to be authorized to still play with them. It's already a nice source of inspiration. Well, let's say the mission statement of Swiss Vintage Studio is just to be a small brick inside the wall, so that, let's say, memory, human beings, qualities, skills, efforts, and knowledge are still authorized to be lived together and lived as a real living standard. Now, let's say, consider that you have the choice between whatever solution, mainstream solution or something a bit more confidential or something which is a bit more limited. But at least with Swiss Vintage Studio, you won't have any comparable experience, because we are very small, we are very dedicated, we've got tons of gears which are not accessible almost anywhere in the world, with so many gears all together in the same place, and the sound and the flavor of it is really different from what the mainstream is producing. It's a bit like being allowed to run in Venice Festival or Cannes Festival with a movie which might be something which is not a blockbuster. Referring to my past experiences in the IT, telco, and security environments, where I saw that you can, let's say, build up many layers and blocks based onto whatever is being offered to you as a basis. I'd like Swiss Vintage Studio to become something where you got several toolboxes. One is dedicated to the present type of production, hopefully in a better way, more skill sets, more capabilities, more gears, better location, whatever. But let's say the aim of Swiss Vintage Studio is not this. To my humble opinion, is to transfer and to teach younger generations to feel alive, independent, and understand how much it costs to focus and dedicate your life to free will, whatever the consequences are. It means that, let's say, if you love music, if you love someone, if you love an art, if you love a sweet situation, if you love a tree, if you love a plant, if you love an animal, whatever you love, there is no negotiation practices to envision for this. So my humble opinion is that we're the latest generation we're the last generation for now, who happened to know before it was totally industrialized, and we're the bridge with your generation and the next one, who is taught to not to even think, because think is disobey. So the good news is that there is more subtle nuances between those two words and those two mindsets. You can still obey or remain mainstream or do whatever you want with as many people worldwide as you want without disturbing the environment or the order or the rules or whatever. But you've got specific skills which are referring to your specific soul. And once again, since the soul is not negotiable, for sure, if you want to stick to the music environment and still have a soul into your recording, better have the ability to get some organic stuff the old way and the old fashioned, because the future is mixing best environments from nowadays generation, which is yours, all this progress, all this knowledge, all this ability to touch so many things and have so many automated tools to solve the tasks, especially the repetitive ones, but without forgetting that there is something which is out of the box, which is provided to you. So don't forget about, let's say, maybe that's this little tiny little sparkle, which is Swiss Vintage Studio in this whole environment of the music industry, is something which might be useful at a certain stage or a certain moment, so that, let's say, you've got another angle of reference, another perspective. First, you need to work very hard. Otherwise, it's dead even before starting, okay? Second, you gotta be lucky, a bit at least. Third, you need to be connected, because if you're just alone by yourself in your studio, it's like being in a pool trying to cry out within the water. Nobody will hear you. So number 4 is to accept to match some nowadays and future enhancements. For instance, though we have so many different organic gears and physical gears available, we also use many virtual instruments, okay? And so, for instance, something which is going to be demonstrated later on this year is how we use some gears and platforms and virtual plugins, such as Hypermorph from Ableton or some other editors and manufacturers, to show to the public that you can mix the old, the present, and the future environments all together. What's quite interesting is that most of the performance that you have at disposal are quite interesting nowadays, especially with your generation, because you are going back to an old art in the electronic music, which is modular synthesizers, which means that, let's say, very intricate type of patching chords and machines, like you are patching vocals, calls, and interlocutors in the 30s and in the 1940s, okay? The same way, but with nowadays technology. So this is producing some magnificent environments, some magnificent things, results, abilities as well. But once again, it's a human being being drifted by a machine. Not driven by a machine, but drifted by a machine. So basically, if you still understand that you have to be rightly at the center of the performance or the recording or whatever, you still remember that you are a human being using machines, not the other way around. It's gonna be better because, for instance, 95% of all artists nowadays don't know how to play a keyboard, a guitar, a flute, a drums, a bass, whatever. They are brilliant because your generation is very connected directly to the tool. Since you're more evolved than our generation for this, because it seems that you are already programmed for this. The thing is, think out of the box. It's not because you are proposed something that it's the only key to the door. Then, to start such an operation, if you intend to remain an artist, Nowadays, artists need to perform live. If they don't perform, if they don't perform live, they can't earn money. Simple. Label, recording studios, music houses, all these don't pay the artist anymore, just for being an artist and producing music in a studio. Spotify and the rest don't pay anything either. So the only way to live, or let's say, not substantially, but at least to live a bit, is to perform live. So you need a small setup, and you need, once again, not the same setup as all your friends or colleagues or the whole set of generation is acquiring, because everyone sounds the same. Of course, there are many lovely sequences, many layers, many paths, but the main problem, everyone sounds the same. So since this is already difficult to be young without means or wealth, without knowledge because you're fully dedicated to your tool to perform, without support because big studios or big houses are not interested into helping you. If you have the same sound than everyone else, to my humble opinion, is it worth it? My humble opinion would say no. So I'm not selling vintage manufacturer gears and toolboxes. I just said something. Don't duplicate yourself the same way you duplicate the setup. That's all. Excellent question, once again. So, first you have to define luck. Because in luck, you've got a chance, you know people or you don't, or you have an accident and it brings you on another timeline and another highway, depends. Or it might be that you accept to be more manipulated by the environment you are meeting, so that it gives you other opportunities. So luck is difficult to define precisely, at least for this. Hard work is very simple. It's measurable. It's number of hours, number of occurrence per hours, number of items solved, number of issues solved, and how many problems you still have at the end of the day. Now, regarding luck, it depends. If you are, let's say, willing to succeed at any cost, you will be very lucky in a short time period, and then it might cost you your life. So even luck is difficult to define. But if you accept to be reasonably lucky and to watch for your health, and not to despise yourself just because you want to reach absolutely one target, then let's say that it's going to be still 80% hard work and 20% luck. Never accept to produce something which is average. You don't even start. Thank you very much to you. Take care of you. Bye.